Debt is bad. Always avoid it. How many times have you heard that? Well, I'm here to tell you it's not always true. In fact, some of the wealthiest people in the world use debt to build their fortunes. Stick around because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how a $50,000 loan turned into $500,000 in revenue for one savvy business owner. You'll learn the secrets of how the rich use debt to get richer and how you can start doing the same. The debt myth that's holding you back. All right, let's talk about debt. You've probably heard it a million times. Debt is bad. Stay away from it. It'll ruin your life. But here's the thing. What if I told you that's not the whole story? In fact, it might be holding you back from some serious financial growth. Think about it. We've all grown up hearing that debt is like this big, scary monster that's going to eat up our savings and leave us broke. It's been drilled into our heads by well-meaning parents, teachers, and even some financial gurus. And sure, there's some truth to it. Debt can be dangerous if you're not careful. But here's where it gets interesting. Have you ever wondered why rich people, the ones who seem to have it all figured out financially, still use debt? It seems kind of weird, right? If debt is so bad, why would people with tons of money bother with it? The truth is, it's not about avoiding debt completely. It's about using it smartly. See, debt isn't inherently good or bad. It's more like a tool. And just like any tool, it can be super helpful if you know how to use it right. But if you don't, yeah, it can cause some real damage. Let's break it down with an example. Imagine you've got a hammer. You can use that hammer to build a beautiful bookshelf for your home. Or, if you're not careful, you could accidentally smash your thumb. The hammer itself isn't good or bad. It's all about how you use it. Debt works the same way. When used strategically, it can actually help you build wealth. That's right. The same debt that everyone's been telling you to avoid like the plague can be a powerful tool for growing your money. So how do smart people use debt to their advantage? Well, they're not maxing out credit cards on shopping sprees or taking out loans for fancy vacations. Instead, they're using debt to invest in things that have the potential to make them more money in the long run. For example, let's say you've got a small business idea. You could save up for years to get the money to start it, or you could take out a business loan. If your idea is solid and you've done your homework, that loan could help you get started much faster. And once your business is up and running, you might be making way more money than the cost of the loan. Or think about buying a house. A mortgage is a form of debt, but it allows you to own an asset that could appreciate in value over time. Plus, you're building equity with each payment instead of just paying rent that you'll never see again. The key is understanding the difference between what we might call good debt and bad debt. Bad debt is when you're borrowing money for things that won't increase in value or generate income. Good debt, on the other hand, is when you're borrowing to invest in something that has the potential to grow your wealth over time. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and start racking up debt left and right. It's still something you need to approach carefully and with a solid plan. But understanding that debt can be a useful financial tool might just open up some opportunities you never considered before. So here's the big takeaway. Debt isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about how you use it. If you're smart about it, debt can actually be a powerful wealth-building tool. It's not about avoiding debt at all costs. It's about learning to use it strategically. Think about it this way. If you're always running away from debt, you might be missing out on opportunities to grow your wealth. It's like refusing to use any tools when you're trying to build something. Sure, you might avoid hurting yourself, but you're also making the job a lot harder than it needs to be. Ready to see debt in a whole new light? It's time to stop thinking of debt as this big, scary monster and start seeing it as a potential ally in your financial journey. When you understand how to use it wisely, you're opening up a whole new world of financial possibilities. The 4 faces of debt. All right, let's dive into the world of debt. You might think you know debt, but here's a surprise. It's not all created equal. What if I told you that some types of debt could actually help you build wealth? Let's explore the 4 faces of debt that could change the way you manage your money. When we talk about debt, it's easy to think of it as one big scary thing. But the truth is, debt comes in different flavors, just like ice cream. And just like ice cream, some are better for you than others. Today, we're going to break down the 4 types of debt: destructive, neutral, strategic, and wealth generating. Understanding these different types can be a game changer for your financial future. Let's start with destructive debt. This is the stuff that keeps you up at night, tossing and turning. It's the credit card balance that never seems to go down, no matter how much you pay, or the payday loan with sky-high interest rates that you took out to cover an emergency. Destructive debt is like a weight on your shoulders, holding you back from reaching your financial goals. It's the kind of debt that grows faster than you can pay it off, leaving you feeling stuck and stressed. Next up, we have neutral debt. This type of debt isn't great, but it's not terrible either. Think of it as the Switzerland of the debt world. It's just kind of there. A good example of neutral debt might be a car loan. Sure, you're paying interest, but you also have a reliable way to get to work and earn money. It's not helping you build wealth, but it's not actively hurting you either. The key with neutral debt is to make sure it doesn't take up too much of your monthly income. Now, this is where things get interesting. Strategic debt. This is when you start to use debt as a tool rather than just a necessity. Strategic debt is all about leveraging borrowed money to create opportunities. For example, taking out a student loan to get a degree that will increase your earning potential, or using a business loan to expand your side hustle into a full-time gig. With strategic debt, you're making a calculated decision to take on debt now for a potential payoff in the future. Finally, we have wealth-generating debt. Yes, that's a real thing. This is the kind of debt that the wealthy use to grow their money even more. It's like planting seeds that grow into money trees. A classic example is using a mortgage to buy a rental property. You're taking on debt, sure, but that property could generate income every month and appreciate in value over time. Another example might be using a low-interest loan to invest in the stock market, aiming for returns that outpace the interest you're paying. Understanding these 4 types of debt is key to making smart money moves. It's like having a map of the financial world. You know which areas to avoid and which ones might lead to treasure. When you can identify what kind of debt you're dealing with, you can make better choices about whether to take it on, how to manage it, and how to use it to your advantage. Let's look at how this might play out in real life. Imagine you have 2 friends, Sarah and Emma. Sarah maxes out her credit cards, buying designer clothes and going on fancy vacations. That's destructive debt. It's not adding any long-term value to her life, and she'll be paying it off for years. Emma, on the other hand, takes out a loan to start an online business. It's a risk, sure, but if her business takes off, that debt could turn into a wealth-generating machine. Or think about buying a house. If you're just scraping by to make the mortgage payments on a house that's way more than you need, that could be neutral or even destructive debt. But if you buy a modest house in an up-and-coming area, live in one part, and rent out the other, suddenly you've turned that mortgage into wealth-generating debt. The key is to be intentional about the debt you take on. Before you borrow money, ask yourself, is this destructive, neutral, strategic, or wealth-generating? Will this debt help me reach my financial goals, or will it hold me back? It's about shifting your mindset from seeing all debt as bad to recognizing it as a tool that, when used wisely, can help build your wealth. Destructive debt, the money pit. Let's talk about destructive debt. You know that feeling when you're trying to save money, but it feels like it's slipping through your fingers? That's often the first sign you're dealing with destructive debt. It's like trying to fill up a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it never seems to get full. Destructive debt is the kind that keeps you up at night. It's the debt that grows faster than you can pay it off, leaving you feeling like you're always playing catch-up. Think about it. Have you ever looked at your credit card statement and felt a pit in your stomach? That's what we're talking about here. Credit cards are often the biggest culprit when it comes to destructive debt. They're so easy to use, right? Swipe here, tap there, and before you know it, you've racked up a balance that's going to take months or even years to pay off. The real kicker? Those high interest rates. They're the reason your balance seems to grow even when you're not using the card. Here's the thing about credit card interest. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts small, but as it picks up speed, it gets bigger and bigger. Let's say you have a $1,000 balance on a card with a 20% interest rate. If you only make the minimum payment each month, it could take you over 7 years to pay it off, and you'd end up paying more than double the original amount. That's money that could have been going towards your savings, your retirement, or that dream vacation you've been planning. But credit cards aren't the only form of destructive debt. Payday loans, for example, can be even worse. These short-term loans might seem like a quick fix when you're in a tight spot, but their sky-high interest rates can trap you in a cycle of borrowing. It's like trying to dig yourself out of a hole, but the hole just keeps getting deeper. Car loans can sometimes fall into this category too, especially if you're buying more car than you can afford. That shiny new SUV might look great in your driveway, but if the payments are eating up a big chunk of your paycheck, it's not doing your financial health any favors. So, how do you spot destructive debt before it's too late? Start by looking at your monthly expenses. Are you spending more than you're earning? Do you find yourself relying on credit cards to cover basic needs like groceries or utility bills? These are red flags that you might be heading into dangerous territory. Another sign is if you're only able to make minimum payments on your debts. While it might feel like you're staying afloat, you're really just treading water. The balance isn't going down, and you're not making any real progress. Destructive debt can have a ripple effect on your entire financial life. It can keep you from saving for important goals, like buying a house or starting a business. It can damage your credit score, making it harder to get loans in the future when you might really need them. And let's be honest, it's stressful. Financial stress can affect your health, your relationships, and your overall quality of life. But here's the good news. Recognizing destructive debt is the first step to breaking free from it. Once you know what you're dealing with, you can start making a plan to tackle it. This might mean creating a budget to cut unnecessary expenses or looking into debt consolidation options to lower your interest rates. Remember, getting out of destructive debt is a journey, not a sprint. It might take time, but every step you take is moving you in the right direction. And trust me, the feeling of making that last payment and knowing you're debt-free, it's worth every bit of effort. Now that we've talked about the most dangerous type of debt, you might be wondering about other forms of borrowing. Is all debt bad? Are there times when taking on debt can actually be a smart move? Let's explore some less obvious forms of debt and see how they stack up. Neutral debt, the financial gray area. Think about the last time you bought a car. Did you pay cash or did you take out a loan? If you're like most people, you probably financed your purchase. That car loan? It's a perfect example of what we call neutral debt. Now you might be wondering, what's neutral debt? It's not as exciting as it sounds, but it's important to understand. Neutral debt is like the Switzerland of the financial world. It's not really helping you, but it's not hurting you either. It's just there. Let's break it down. When you take out a car loan with a low interest rate, you're not exactly building wealth. Your car isn't likely to increase in value over time. But if you got a good deal on the loan, you're not losing much money either. You're just slowly paying for something you need. Here's the thing. Neutral debt can be tricky. It's easy to think, well, it's not hurting me, so it's fine. But is that really enough when we're talking about your hard-earned money? Shouldn't your money be working for you instead of just sitting there? Think about it this way. If you have $20,000 in neutral debt, that's $20,000 that isn't growing or shrinking. It's just existing. And while it's not actively draining your wallet like high-interest credit card debt, it's also not making you any richer. But let's not be too quick to judge neutral debt. It can actually be pretty useful. For example, that car loan we talked about, it might be helping you get to work every day. Or maybe you took out a small personal loan to cover an unexpected expense. As long as the interest rate is reasonable, these types of loans can help you manage your cash flow without causing financial stress. The key is to be smart about it. Neutral debt can be okay, but you don't want it to hold you back. Here are a few things to keep in mind. First, always shop around for the best interest rates. The lower the rate, the closer you are to truly neutral territory. Second, make sure you're not overextending yourself. Just because a debt isn't actively hurting you doesn't mean you should take on more than you can handle. And here's a pro tip. Try to pay a little extra on your neutral debt when you can. Even small additional payments can help you pay off the loan faster and save on interest in the long run. Now, you might hear some people say that all debt is bad debt, but that's not always true. Neutral debt can be a useful tool if you use it wisely. It can help you get things you need without breaking the bank or falling into a cycle of high-interest payments. But, and this is important, you need to be careful not to let neutral debt slide into destructive territory. How does that happen? Well, let's say you took out that car loan we talked about earlier. At first, it was neutral. You were making your payments on time and everything was fine. But then you lost your job and started missing payments. Suddenly, that neutral debt isn't so neutral anymore. It's hurting your credit score and causing you stress. Or maybe you decided to use your home equity line of credit, which could be considered neutral debt, to fund a lavish vacation. Now, you're paying interest on memories, and that debt is starting to look a lot less neutral. The trick is to use neutral debt strategically. If you need to make a big purchase and you can get a low-interest loan, that might be a smart move. But if you're using neutral debt to fund a lifestyle you can't really afford, you might be heading for trouble. Think of neutral debt like a financial tool. It's not inherently good or bad, it all depends on how you use it. Used wisely, it can help you manage your finances and get the things you need. Used carelessly, it can become a burden. So, what's the bottom line on neutral debt? It's okay to have some, but don't let it become a crutch. Always be looking for ways to improve your financial situation. Maybe that means paying off your neutral debt a little faster, or finding ways to turn that neutral debt into something more positive. Strategic debt, borrowing with a purpose. Let's talk about strategic debt. It's a concept that might make you raise an eyebrow at first, but hear me out. Strategic debt isn't about maxing out credit cards or taking loans you can't afford. It's about borrowing with a clear purpose and a solid plan. Think about it like this. If someone offered you $1,000 today, but you knew you could turn it into $5,000 in a year, would you take it? That's the mindset behind strategic debt. It's not just about having money now. It's about using that money to create more value in the future. Here's the thing. Strategic debt is all about intention. When you take on this kind of debt, you're not just hoping things will work out. You've done your homework, crunched the numbers, and have a clear vision of how this borrowed money will pay off. Let's look at a real-life example. Imagine you're a freelance graphic designer, and you've been saving up to buy some new equipment. You know that with better tech, you could take on more clients and higher paying projects, but at your current rate, it might take you another year to save up enough. This is where strategic debt comes in. You might decide to take out a small business loan to buy that equipment now. Yes, you'll have debt, but you're not just spending money, you're investing in your future earning potential. If your calculations are right, the extra income you'll generate will more than cover the loan payments and interest. Or, think about buying a home. A mortgage is a big commitment, but it can be a form of strategic debt. Instead of paying rent that disappears each month, you're building equity in a property that could appreciate over time. Plus, if you choose wisely, you might be able to rent out a room or use part of the space for a home business, creating additional income streams. Now you might be wondering, how do I know if my plan is actually smart? That's a great question, and it's exactly the kind of thinking that separates strategic debt from other types. Here are a few key points to consider. 1. Return on investment, ROI. Will the money you borrow generate more value than it costs? This could be in the form of increased income, asset appreciation, or long-term savings. 2. Risk assessment. What's the worst-case scenario if things don't go as planned? Make sure you have a backup strategy. 3. Timeline. How long will it take for this debt to pay off? Strategic debt should have a clear endpoint. 4. Opportunity cost. What are you giving up by taking on this debt? Make sure the potential benefits outweigh what you're sacrificing. 5. Personal goals. Does this align with your long-term financial and personal objectives? Let's be clear. Strategic debt isn't risk-free. Nothing in finance ever is, but when used wisely, it can be a powerful tool for growth and wealth creation. It's about leveraging other people's money to accelerate your own progress. Consider this. Many successful businesses started with strategic debt. Entrepreneurs often use loans or investors' money to get their ideas off the ground. They're betting that the future value of their business will far exceed the initial debt. Or think about education. Student loans can be a form of strategic debt if they lead to increased earning potential in a field you're passionate about. The key is to be realistic about future job prospects and salary expectations. Even in personal finance, strategic debt can play a role. Maybe you're considering a home renovation that will significantly increase your property value. If the expected increase in value is greater than the cost of the loan, that's strategic thinking. But here's an important point. Strategic debt isn't for everyone, all the time. It requires discipline, planning, and often a bit of courage. You need to be in a stable financial position to even consider it. If you're struggling with destructive debt or living paycheck to paycheck, your first priority should be getting on solid financial ground. Remember, the goal of strategic debt is to help you achieve big financial goals faster than you could on your own. It's about using debt as a tool, not a crutch. When wealth-generating debt, making money work for you. Let's talk about a type of debt that might sound too good to be true, wealth-generating debt. I know, the idea of debt making you richer seems crazy, but hear me out. This isn't just any old debt. It's the secret weapon that many wealthy people use to build their fortunes. And here's the exciting part. It's not just for the rich and famous. Regular folks like us can use it too. So what exactly is wealth-generating debt? Simply put, it's borrowing money that creates more value than it costs. Think about it like this. If you could borrow $100 today and turn it into $150 next month, wouldn't you do it? That's the basic idea behind wealth-generating debt. Let's look at some real-life examples to make this clearer. Imagine you have the opportunity to buy a rental property. You take out a mortgage to purchase the house, and then you rent it out. If the rent you collect each month is more than your mortgage payment, property taxes, and maintenance costs, you're essentially using debt to generate wealth. The tenants are paying off your loan, and you're building equity in a property that might also increase in value over time. Or consider this scenario. You decide to go back to school to get an advanced degree or certification. You take out a student loan to cover the costs. After graduating, you land a job with a significantly higher salary than you had before. In this case, the debt you took on for education has increased your earning power, potentially paying for itself many times over during your career. Here's the thing about wealth-generating debt. It's all about the numbers. The key is that the debt pays for itself, and then some. You're not just breaking even, you're coming out ahead. It's like planting a money tree that grows faster than the interest on your loan. Now, I'm not saying this is a risk-free strategy. Like any financial decision, using wealth-generating debt requires careful planning and consideration. You need to do your homework, crunch the numbers, and make sure the potential returns outweigh the costs and risks involved. For example, if you're considering buying a rental property, you'd want to research the local real estate market, understand all the costs involved in being a landlord, and have a solid plan for finding and keeping good tenants. You'd also want to have some emergency savings in case of unexpected repairs or periods when the property is vacant. Or if you're thinking about taking out a loan for education, you'd want to research the job market in your chosen field, understand the potential salary increase you could expect, and have a plan for managing your loan payments after graduation. The power of wealth-generating debt lies in its ability to accelerate your financial growth. Instead of waiting years to save up enough money to invest in a property or further your education, you can use debt to seize opportunities now and potentially reap the benefits sooner. Think about it this way. If you wait 10 years to save up enough to buy a rental property, you've missed out on 10 years of potential rental income and property appreciation. By using wealth-generating debt, you could start building that wealth much sooner. But here's an important point to remember. Wealth-generating debt isn't for everyone, and it's not appropriate for every situation. You need to be in a stable financial position to even consider this strategy. That means having a steady income, good credit, and a solid understanding of your financial situation. You also need to be prepared for things not to go as planned. What if the real estate market takes a downturn? What if you can't find tenants for your rental property? What if the job market in your chosen field becomes saturated? These are all risks you need to consider and plan for. That's why it's crucial to approach wealth-generating debt with a clear head and a solid plan. Don't let the potential for wealth cloud your judgment. Always do your due diligence, seek advice from financial professionals if needed, and be prepared to walk away if the numbers don't add up. The $50,000 loan that turned into $500,000. Let's dive into a real-life example that shows just how powerful wealth-generating debt can be. Remember that $50,000 loan we mentioned earlier? It's time to see how a relatively small amount of debt can create a financial tidal wave. Meet Sarah, a savvy small business owner who runs an online store selling handmade jewelry. Sarah had been doing pretty well with annual revenue of about $100,000, but she knew she could do better. The problem was, she didn't have the cash on hand to take her business to the next level. Sarah faced a tough decision. She could play it safe and stick with her current setup, or she could take a risk and borrow money to grow her business. Taking on debt was scary. After all, what if things didn't work out? But Sarah also knew that not growing meant potentially falling behind her competitors. After careful consideration, Sarah decided to go for it. She took out a $50,000 loan and put it to work in her business. But here's the important part. Sarah didn't use this money for frivolous expenses or unnecessary upgrades. She had a solid plan in place. First, Sarah invested in improving her website. She hired a professional web designer to create a sleek, user-friendly site that would make shopping easier for her customers. This included better product photos, a more intuitive navigation system, and a smoother checkout process. Next, Sarah used a portion of the loan to increase her inventory. With more products available, she could take on more customers and offer a wider variety of options. This meant she could appeal to a broader audience and potentially increase her average order value. But Sarah didn't stop there. She also invested in better packaging and shipping materials. This might seem like a small detail, but it made a big difference in customer satisfaction. Her products now arrived looking more professional and were better protected during shipping, leading to fewer returns and more positive reviews. Finally, Sarah put some money into targeted online advertising. She had always relied on word of mouth before, but now she was able to reach new customers who had never heard of her brand. The results were nothing short of amazing. Within a year, Sarah's revenue had grown from $100,000 to $500,000 to $500,000. That's a 400% increase. The loan that seemed so scary at first had fueled explosive growth in her business. But here's the really impressive part. Because Sarah's business was now bringing in so much more money, she was able to pay off the loan quickly. And even after the loan was paid off, her profits continued to grow. She had used debt as a springboard to launch her business to new heights. This is a perfect example of strategic, wealth-generating debt in action. Sarah didn't borrow money to buy fancy equipment or treat herself to a luxury vacation. She borrowed with a specific purpose in mind and a solid plan for how to use the money to grow her business. Now you might be thinking, that's great for Sarah, but I don't own a business. How does this apply to me? Well, the principles are the same, whether you're running a business or managing your personal finances. The key is to use debt strategically to invest in things that have the potential to grow your wealth over time. For example, let's say you're considering taking out a loan to go back to school and get an advanced degree. If that degree will significantly increase your earning potential, it could be a form of wealth-generating debt. Or maybe you're thinking about taking out a mortgage to buy a rental property. If the rent you collect exceeds your mortgage payments and other expenses, that's another way to use debt to build wealth. The point is, when used wisely, debt can be a powerful tool for financial growth. It's not about avoiding debt entirely, but about using it strategically to create opportunities that wouldn't be possible otherwise. But here's an important caveat. Wealth-generating debt isn't for everyone, and it's not without risks. It requires careful planning, a stable financial foundation, and a clear understanding of the potential risks and rewards. Before taking on any kind of debt, it's crucial to do your homework, crunch the numbers, and make sure you have a solid plan in place. Buy, borrow, die. The wealthy person's playbook. Speaking of solid plans, there's a strategy that billionaires swear by. It's called buy, borrow, die, and it's not as morbid as it sounds. In fact, it might be the key to unlocking wealth you never knew you had. Let's break it down. The buy, borrow, die strategy is like a secret playbook for the ultra-wealthy. But here's the thing, you don't need to be a billionaire to learn from it. This approach shows us how smart people use debt to grow their wealth, and there are lessons here for all of us. So, what's the first step? It's all about buying assets that grow in value over time. Think stocks, real estate, or even a thriving business. The key is to invest in things that are likely to be worth more in the future than they are today. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Instead of selling these assets when they need cash, wealthy people borrow against them. It's like taking out a loan, but using your investments as collateral. This is a game changer because it gives them access to money without triggering those pesky capital gains taxes. Let's say you own a bunch of stocks that have gone up in value. If you sell them, you'll have to pay taxes on the profit. But if you borrow against them instead, you get the cash you need without the tax bill. It's a pretty smart move, right? The die part of the strategy might sound a bit grim, but it's actually a clever way to think about long-term planning. When someone passes away, their assets often get a step-up in basis. This means the value of the asset is reset for tax purposes, potentially wiping out years of capital gains. So, by holding on to these assets until death, wealthy individuals can pass them on to their heirs with a much lower tax burden. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds complicated. Is it really for me? The truth is, while the full strategy might not be accessible to everyone, there are still valuable lessons we can learn from it. For starters, it shows us the power of investing in assets that grow over time. Even if you're not ready to borrow against your investments, putting your money into things that appreciate in value is a smart move for anyone. It also highlights how strategic borrowing can be a tool for financial growth. While we're not suggesting you take on massive loans, there might be times when borrowing against your assets makes more sense than selling them outright. And perhaps most importantly, it underscores the value of thinking long-term about your finances. The wealthy don't just plan for next year or the next decade, they think in terms of generations. While we might not all be leaving behind massive estates, adopting this long-term mindset can help us make smarter financial decisions today. Of course, this strategy isn't without its critics. Some argue that it allows the wealthy to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. Others point out that it can be risky. If the value of your assets drops, you could end up owing more than they're worth. But regardless of where you stand on these issues, there's no denying that the buy, borrow, die strategy offers some valuable insights into how debt can be used as a tool for building wealth. So, what does this mean for you? Well, it's all about perspective. Instead of seeing debt as something to always avoid, try thinking of it as a potential tool in your financial toolkit. Could borrowing help you invest in something that will grow your wealth over time? Are there ways you could use debt more strategically in your own life? Remember, though, that this isn't an invitation to take on risky debt. The key is to be smart about it. Make sure you understand the terms of any loan you're considering and always have a solid plan for how you'll pay it back. In the end, strategies like buy, borrow, die remind us that building wealth often requires thinking outside the box. It's about being creative with your resources and making your money work for you, not the other way around. Dave Ramsey versus reality, a fresh look at debt advice. Let's talk about a name you've probably heard if you've ever looked into personal finance advice: Dave Ramsey. He's helped thousands of people get out of debt, and his no-nonsense approach has been a lifeline for many who were drowning in credit card bills. But here's the thing. While Ramsey's advice can be a game changer for some, it might not be the best fit for everyone's financial journey. Think about it. Ramsey's core message is pretty straightforward. All debt is bad, and you should avoid it at all costs. It's a simple idea that's easy to grasp, and for folks struggling with high-interest credit card debt, it's solid advice. If you're constantly juggling bills and feeling like you're on a financial treadmill, Ramsey's debt-free approach can be exactly what you need to get back on track. But what if you're not in that situation? What if you're in a stable financial position and looking to grow your wealth? This is where Ramsey's one-size-fits-all approach might not be the best fit. Remember how we talked about different types of debt? Ramsey's advice treats all debt the same, whether it's a high-interest credit card or a low-interest business loan that could potentially triple your income. Now, don't get me wrong, Ramsey's not entirely off base. His emphasis on living below your means and saving for emergencies is spot on. These are smart money moves that everyone should consider. But when it comes to using debt as a tool for growth, his approach might be a bit too black and white. Let's look at a real-world example. Imagine you're Sarah, a small business owner we talked about earlier. You're making $100,000 a year, but you see an opportunity to expand your business. Following Ramsey's advice, you might save up for years to fund that expansion. But what if taking out a strategic loan could help you reach that goal faster and start earning more money sooner? This is where understanding your own financial situation and goals becomes crucial. If you're in a stable position with a solid emergency fund and a clear plan for growth, strategic debt might be a smart move. It's about weighing the potential benefits against the risks and making an informed decision. Now you might be thinking, but isn't debt always risky? And you're right to be cautious. Debt does come with risks, and it's not something to jump into without careful consideration. But here's the thing. Avoiding all debt can also be risky in its own way. It might mean missing out on opportunities for growth or delaying important investments in your future. Think about buying a house, for example. Ramsey often advises saving up to buy a home with cash. That's great if you can do it, but for many people, it could mean waiting years or even decades to become a homeowner. During that time, you're missing out on building equity and potentially benefiting from property value increases. Or consider education. Ramsey generally advises against student loans. But what if taking out a reasonable loan for a degree could significantly increase your earning potential? In that case, the long-term benefits might outweigh the short-term cost of the debt. The key here is to understand that good debt advice depends on your individual circumstances and goals. If you're struggling with high-interest consumer debt, then yes, Ramsey's advice to cut up those credit cards and focus on paying off debt is probably spot on. But if you're in a stable financial position and looking to grow your wealth, you might need a more nuanced approach. So, how do you figure out what's right for you? Start by taking a good, honest look at your financial situation. Are you living paycheck to paycheck, or do you have some breathing room? Do you have an emergency fund? What are your long-term financial goals? Once you have a clear picture of where you stand, you can start to consider whether strategic debt might be a useful tool for you. Maybe it's a business loan to expand your side hustle, or a mortgage on a rental property. The important thing is to approach these decisions with a clear head and a solid plan. Remember, using debt as a tool for growth isn't about being reckless or living beyond your means. It's about making calculated decisions that align with your financial goals. It's about understanding the difference between destructive debt that holds you back and strategic debt that can propel you forward. In the end, the best financial advice isn't one size fits all. It's about understanding your options, knowing your goals, and making informed decisions that work for you. Dave Ramsey's advice has its place, and it's helped many people. But as you grow in your financial journey, don't be afraid to look beyond one perspective and explore strategies that might better fit your unique situation. Debt as an investment, thinking like the wealthy. We've talked a lot about different types of debt and how to avoid the bad stuff. But here's something that might surprise you. What if I told you that some of the wealthiest people actually seek out debt? It sounds crazy, right? But there's a method to this financial strategy that could change the way you think about money forever. Let's talk about debt as an investment. I know, it sounds like an oxymoron, but stick with me here. The wealthy don't just see debt as a way to buy things they can't afford. They see it as a tool to grow their wealth. It's like they're playing a whole different game with money. Think about it this way. When you invest in something, you're putting money in with the expectation that you'll get more back later, right? Well, that's exactly how the wealthy look at certain types of debt. They're not just borrowing money, they're investing it. But here's the million-dollar question. How do you know if a debt is really an investment? It's not always easy to tell, but there are some key things to look for. First, ask yourself, will this debt help me increase my income? Or will it help me acquire something that's likely to grow in value over time? Let's break that down a bit. When we talk about debt that could increase your income, we're thinking about things like education or starting a business. Maybe you're considering taking out a loan to get an advanced degree that could lead to a higher-paying job. Or perhaps you're thinking about borrowing money to start a side hustle that could grow into a full-fledged business. On the other hand, when we talk about debt that helps you acquire assets that will grow in value, we're often talking about real estate. A mortgage might seem like a huge debt, but if you're buying a home in an area where property values are likely to increase, that debt could be an investment in your future wealth. The key here is to focus on the return on investment, not just the cost of the debt. It's easy to get scared off by big numbers, but wealthy people look beyond that. They're asking, what's the potential upside here? How much could this grow my wealth in the long run? Now, I'm not saying you should run out and take on a bunch of debt just because it might make you money someday. That's not smart at all. What I am saying is that it's worth considering debt as a potential tool for growth, not just something to avoid at all costs. Here's an example. Let's say you've been thinking about starting an online business selling handmade jewelry. You could save up for years to buy all the equipment and materials you need, or you could take out a small business loan to get started sooner. If you've done your research and you're confident in your business plan, that loan could help you start earning money much faster than if you waited to save up. Or think about buying a home. In many areas, rent prices are going up faster than home values. If you can get a mortgage with a fixed interest rate, your housing costs might actually be more stable in the long run than if you kept renting. Plus, you're building equity in a property that could increase in value over time. The payoff of viewing debt this way is that it can open up opportunities you might not have considered before. It's about seeing the big picture and thinking long-term. The wealthy aren't afraid of debt, they're afraid of missed opportunities. But here's the thing, using debt as an investment strategy isn't for everyone, and it's definitely not without risks. So how do you use debt without getting into financial trouble? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? First and foremost, you need to have a solid financial foundation. That means having a steady income, an emergency fund, and a good handle on your current expenses. You also need to be really honest with yourself about your ability to take on and manage debt. Next, you need to do your homework. If you're thinking about taking on debt for an investment, research the heck out of it. What's the potential return? What are the risks? What's your plan if things don't go as expected? It's also crucial to understand the terms of any debt you're considering. What's the interest rate? Are there any fees? How long will it take to pay off? Make sure you're not getting in over your head. And perhaps most importantly, you need to have a clear plan for how you'll use the debt to grow your wealth. It's not enough to just hope things will work out. You need a solid strategy. The secret to using debt without getting burned. All right, let's talk about the secret to using debt without getting burned. We've covered a lot of ground on how debt can be a powerful tool for building wealth, but here's the thing. It can also be incredibly dangerous if you're not careful. So what's the key to making sure debt works for you instead of against you? Think about it like this. Using debt is a bit like walking a tightrope. It can be exhilarating and get you where you want to go faster, but one wrong step and you could be in trouble. The secret to staying balanced on that tightrope? Understanding and managing risk. Now I know what you're thinking. Risk assessment? That sounds complicated and boring. But hear me out. It's actually pretty straightforward, and it's absolutely crucial if you want to use debt to grow your wealth without falling into a financial pit. Let's start with something called your debt-to-income ratio. It's just a fancy way of saying how much of your monthly income goes towards paying off debts. Think about it like this. If you're spending half your paycheck just keeping up with debt payments, you might be stretching yourself too thin. A good rule of thumb is to keep your debt payments under 36% of your income. Any more than that, and you might be taking on more risk than you can handle. But that's just the beginning. You also need to think about your ability to repay the debt, even if things don't go according to plan. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, right? So before you take on any debt, ask yourself, if I lost my job tomorrow, or if my business hit a rough patch, could I still make these payments? If the answer is no, you might want to reconsider. Here's another important thing to consider: the potential return on investment compared to the interest rate. Let's say you're thinking about taking out a loan to start a side business. If the interest rate on the loan is 10%, but you expect your business to generate a 20% return, that could be a smart move. But if the numbers are flipped, if you're paying more in interest than you're likely to earn, that's a red flag. Now, let's talk about having a clear plan for repaying the debt. This is where a lot of people stumble. They take on debt with a vague idea of how they'll pay it back, but no concrete plan. That's like setting out on a road trip without a map or GPS. You might eventually get where you're going, but you're likely to take some wrong turns along the way. So before you sign on that dotted line, map out exactly how you'll repay the debt. Will it be from the increased income you expect to earn, from selling an asset, from cutting expenses in other areas? Be specific and make sure your plan is realistic. And here's a smart money move that a lot of people overlook. Always have a backup plan. Because let's face it, even the best laid plans sometimes go awry. So what's your plan B if things don't work out as expected? Maybe it's having a certain amount in savings or having a skill you could leverage for extra income if needed. Whatever it is, make sure you have a safety net. Remember, proper risk assessment isn't about being overly cautious or avoiding debt altogether. It's about making sure you're using debt in a way that's strategic and sustainable. It's about understanding the potential downsides and being prepared for them, so you can confidently pursue the upsides. Think of it like this. When you're driving a car, you don't just focus on the accelerator. You also need to know where the brakes are, how to steer, and how to navigate different road conditions. Using debt responsibly is similar. It's not just about the potential speed boost to your finances, but also about knowing how to control and direct that power. Now, you might be wondering, if managing debt is so important, why do so many people struggle with it? That's a great question, and it's exactly what we're going to explore next, because the 70% trap, why most Americans struggle with debt. Let's talk about a statistic that might hit close to home. Did you know that a whopping 70% of Americans are struggling with debt? That's right. For every 10 people you know, 7 of them are likely grappling with financial challenges. But here's the thing. Why do so many people find themselves caught in this debt trap, while others seem to navigate it with ease? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. It's not just about spending too much or not earning enough. There's a whole web of factors that contribute to this widespread struggle with debt. And understanding these factors is the first step to making sure you don't fall into the same traps. One of the biggest reasons so many people struggle with debt is a lack of financial education. Think about it. How much did you learn about managing money in school? For most of us, the answer is not much. We're expected to navigate a complex financial world without being given the proper tools. It's like being asked to build a house without ever being taught how to use a hammer. This lack of education leads to a lot of misunderstandings about debt. Many people see all debt as bad, something to be avoided at all costs. But that's not always the case. There are different types of debt, and some can actually help you build wealth if used wisely. But without this knowledge, people often end up using debt in ways that hurt them financially. Another big issue is that many people use debt for consumption rather than investment. What does that mean? Well, instead of using debt to buy things that might increase in value or generate income, like education or starting a business, they use it to buy things that lose value over time. Think about using a credit card to buy a new TV or fancy clothes. These things might bring temporary happiness, but they won't help your financial situation in the long run. Speaking of credit cards, they're often a major culprit in debt struggles. Credit cards can be useful tools, but they can also be dangerous if not used carefully. The high interest rates on credit card debt can quickly spiral out of control, leaving people paying far more than they originally borrowed. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. You're constantly playing catch-up. Many people also struggle because they don't have a clear plan for managing their debt. They might make minimum payments on their credit cards or take out loans without really understanding how they'll pay them back. It's like setting out on a road trip without a map. You might eventually get to your destination, but the journey will be a lot longer and more stressful than it needs to be. So, why does all this matter? Well, understanding why people struggle with debt is the first step to avoiding these traps yourself. It's about recognizing the pitfalls so you can steer clear of them. And here's the exciting part. Once you understand these challenges, you can start to see debt not just as a burden, but as a potential tool for building wealth. This brings us to an interesting question. How do rich people think about debt differently? Well, they often see debt as a strategic tool rather than a necessary evil. They understand that not all debt is created equal, and they're skilled at using it to their advantage. Wealthy individuals often use debt to invest in assets that are likely to grow in value over time. They might take out a loan to start a business, invest in real estate, or fund their education. They're not using debt to buy things they can't afford. They're using it to create more wealth in the long run. They also tend to be very strategic about the types of debt they take on. They look for low-interest loans and carefully calculate the potential return on their investments. It's all about making sure the benefits of the debt outweigh the costs. Another key difference is that wealthy people often have a clear plan for managing their debt. They don't just take on debt and hope for the best. They have a solid strategy for paying it off and using it to their advantage. They're proactive rather than reactive when it comes to their finances. But here's the thing. You don't have to be wealthy to start thinking about debt this way. By understanding these principles, anyone can start to use debt more strategically. It's about shifting your mindset from seeing debt as a burden to seeing it as a potential tool for growth. The wealthy mindset, a new way to think about debt. Let's talk about a mindset shift that could change your financial future. You might be thinking, okay, debt can be strategic, but surely the rich try to avoid it altogether, right? Wrong. The wealthy have a completely different relationship with debt, one that might surprise you. Ready to peek behind the curtain of wealth-building strategies? When it comes to debt, rich people don't see it as a dirty word. They view it as a powerful tool that, when used correctly, can help them build even more wealth. It's like having a secret weapon in their financial arsenal. But here's the thing. It's not really a secret. It's just a different way of thinking about money and debt that most of us weren't taught growing up. Think about it. When you hear the word debt, what's your gut reaction? For many of us, it's stress, anxiety, or even shame. But for wealthy individuals, it's opportunity. They don't shy away from debt. They lean into it. But not in a reckless way. They're actually very careful about how they use it. So what's the difference? It all comes down to mindset. Rich people focus on the potential return, not just the cost of borrowing. They're always asking themselves, how can I use this debt to make more money? It's not about buying stuff they can't afford. It's about investing in things that will grow their wealth over time. Let's break it down with an example. Imagine you have the opportunity to borrow $100,000 at 5% interest. The average person might think, wow, that's a lot of debt. I'd have to pay $5,000 in interest every year. But a wealthy person might think, if I can use this $100,000 to make a 15% return, I'll be earning $15,000 a year while only paying $5,000 in interest. That's a $10,000 profit. This is the power of leverage, and it's a concept that wealthy people understand deeply. They know that using other people's money in the form of debt can help them achieve their financial goals faster than if they relied solely on their own cash. But don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean rich people are out there taking on debt left and right without a care in the world. They're actually very strategic about it. They carefully consider the risks and rewards of each opportunity. They look at factors like interest rates, potential returns, and market conditions before making a decision. Another key difference is that wealthy individuals aren't afraid of debt, but they respect it. They know it's a powerful tool that needs to be handled with care. They're not losing sleep over their debts because they have a solid plan for managing and paying them off. Rich people are also always looking for ways to make their money work harder. They understand that sitting on a pile of cash isn't always the best strategy. Instead, they look for opportunities to put that money to work, even if it means taking on some debt to do so. For example, they might take out a loan to invest in real estate, knowing that the property will likely appreciate over time and generate rental income. Or they might use debt to expand their business, understanding that the increased revenue will more than cover the cost of the loan. Now you might be thinking, that all sounds great, but I'm not rich. How does this apply to me? Here's the thing. You don't have to be wealthy to start thinking about debt this way. By understanding these principles, anyone can start to use debt more strategically. It starts with changing your mindset. Instead of seeing debt as something to be avoided at all costs, start looking at it as a potential tool for growth. Ask yourself, how could taking on this debt help me increase my income or build my wealth in the long run? Of course, this doesn't mean you should go out and start racking up debt without a plan. It's crucial to do your homework, understand the risks, and have a solid strategy in place. But by adopting a wealthy mindset about debt, you can start to see financial opportunities where you might have only seen obstacles before. Remember, the goal isn't to take on more debt. The goal is to be smarter about the debt you do take on. It's about using debt as a stepping stone to build wealth, not as a crutch to support a lifestyle you can't afford. Good debt versus bad debt, how to spot the difference. Let's talk about a game changer in your financial journey. Understanding the difference between good debt and bad debt. You might be thinking, wait, isn't all debt bad? But here's the thing. Not all debt is created equal. Some can help you build wealth, while others can drain your bank account faster than you can say credit card bill. Think about debt like a tool. In the right hands, it can build something amazing. In the wrong hands, well, let's just say it can cause some serious damage. The key is knowing how to spot the difference between good debt and bad debt. It's like having a financial superpower that can help you make smart money moves. So what makes debt good or bad? Good debt is like planting a money tree. It has the potential to grow your wealth or increase your income over time. Bad debt, on the other hand, is more like buying a fancy car that loses value the moment you drive it off the lot. It doesn't improve your financial situation and often leaves you worse off than before. Let's break it down with some real-life examples. Imagine you're thinking about taking out a loan. You've got two options. Option A is a loan to start a small business, and option B is a loan to fund a luxurious vacation. Which one do you think is good debt? If you guessed option A, you're on the right track. A loan to start a business could potentially increase your income and build long-term wealth. It's an investment in your future. The vacation loan? While it might give you some great memories, it won't do much for your bank account in the long run. Another way to spot good debt is by looking at the interest rate. Generally, lower interest rates are better. Why? Because you're paying less to borrow that money. For example, a mortgage with a 3% interest rate is typically considered good debt. Not only are you building equity in a home, but you're doing it at a relatively low cost. On the flip side, credit card debt with a 20% interest rate, that's bad debt territory. You're paying a lot for the privilege of borrowing that money, and it's not likely to increase in value or boost your income. But interest rates aren't the whole story. You also need to consider the purpose of the debt. Is it for consumption or investment? Consumption debt, like using a credit card to buy new clothes or gadgets, usually falls into the bad debt category. It doesn't generate income or increase in value over time. Investment debt, like borrowing to get an education or buy a rental property, can be good debt. These investments have the potential to increase your earning power or generate income in the future. Here's a quick way to tell if you're dealing with good debt or bad debt. Ask yourself, will this debt help me build wealth or increase my income in the long run? If the answer is yes, it's probably good debt. If the answer is no, or you're not sure, it might be bad debt. But remember, even good debt comes with risks. Taking on too much debt, even if it's good, can put a strain on your finances. It's all about balance and making sure you have a solid plan to pay it back. Think about the long-term impact on your financial goals. Will this debt help you get closer to where you want to be financially, or will it set you back? Good debt should align with your overall financial plan and help you achieve your goals faster. For example, if your goal is to own a home, taking on mortgage debt could be a smart move. It gets you closer to your goal of homeownership and building equity. But if your goal is to travel the world, taking on a big car loan might not be the best choice. It could tie up money you'd rather use for travel expenses. Learning to distinguish between good and bad debt is like learning to read a financial map. It helps you navigate your way to financial success. It's not always easy, and sometimes the lines can get blurry. But with practice, you'll get better at spotting the difference. Remember, the goal isn't to avoid all debt. It's about using debt wisely as a tool to build wealth. Good debt can be a powerful ally in your financial journey. Bad debt? Well, that's more like a ball and chain holding you back. 5 steps to transform your debt into a wealth builder. Now that you know the difference between good and bad debt, are you ready to turn your financial ball and chain into a wealth-building rocket? Let's talk about how to make your debt work for you with a simple 5-step plan that could change your financial future. Think about it. Transforming your debt isn't just about paying bills. It's about shifting your mindset and seeing debt as a potential tool for growth. But here's the thing. Where do you start when you're already in debt? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Step 1 is all about honesty. Take a good, hard look at your current debt situation. Write down every single debt you have. Credit cards, student loans, mortgages, everything. Note the interest rates and monthly payments for each. This might feel a bit scary, but trust me, knowing exactly where you stand is crucial. It's like cleaning out your closet. You need to see everything you have before you can organize it. Once you've got everything laid out, it's time for step 2, identifying and tackling any destructive debt. Remember, this is the kind of debt that's draining your wallet without giving anything back. Credit card balances with high interest rates? Those need to go first. Think about it like weeding a garden. You've got to pull out the harmful stuff before you can plant something new. Now, let's move on to step 3, looking for opportunities to convert neutral debt into strategic debt. This is where things get interesting. Maybe you have a car loan that's just sitting there, neither helping nor hurting. Could you refinance that loan and use the extra cash to start a side hustle? Or perhaps you could sell the car, buy a less expensive one, and invest the difference. The goal here is to make your money work harder for you. Step 4 is where the real magic happens. It's time to explore options for wealth-generating debt that aligns with your goals. This could mean taking out a loan to start a business, investing in real estate, or even borrowing to fund your education if it'll lead to a higher-paying job. Remember, the key here is to make sure the potential return outweighs the cost of borrowing. Finally, step 5 is all about staying on track. Create a plan to manage and monitor your debt strategy over time. This isn't a set it and forget it kind of deal. You need to regularly check in on your debts, make sure you're sticking to your repayment plans, and adjust your strategy as needed. Think of it like tending to a garden. You need to water, prune, and sometimes replant to keep everything healthy and growing. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds great, but how do I know if I'm ready for this? Here's a quick checklist. 1. Do you have a steady income? 2. Have you built up an emergency fund? 3. Do you understand your current expenses and have a budget? 4. Are you comfortable with some level of financial risk? If you answered yes to these questions, you're in a good position to start using debt as a wealth-building tool. If not, don't worry. Focus on these basics first, and you'll be ready for strategic borrowing before you know it. Let's talk about a real-life example. Meet Sarah, a freelance graphic designer. She started with $5,000 in credit card debt from when she was just starting out. After paying that off, she took out a $10,000 loan to upgrade her equipment and take some advanced courses. Within a year, she was able to take on higher-paying clients and doubled her income. The loan interest? A small price to pay for the boost in her earning power. Remember, using debt to build wealth isn't about borrowing as much as you can. It's about being smart with the debt you take on. Always do your research, understand the terms of any loan you're considering, and have a clear plan for how you'll use the money to grow your wealth. Here's another important point. This strategy isn't one size fits all. Your debt transformation plan should align with your personal financial goals. Maybe you want to retire early, or perhaps you're saving up for a down payment on a house. Whatever your goals, make sure your debt strategy is helping you get there, not holding you back. The power of strategic borrowing. Keep your money, grow your wealth. Let's talk about a powerful strategy that might sound a bit counterintuitive at first: strategic borrowing. You've probably heard that debt is something to avoid, right? But what if I told you that borrowing money could actually help you keep more of your own cash while growing your wealth at the same time? Here's the thing. Strategic borrowing is all about using other people's money to your advantage. It's a smart money move that the financially savvy use to make their money work harder for them. But I know what you're thinking. Isn't using debt risky? How can you do it safely without getting in over your head? The key is to borrow at a lower rate than you can earn by investing. Think about it like this. If you can borrow money at 5% interest, but you're confident you can earn 10% on your investments, you're actually coming out ahead. This strategy allows you to keep your money invested and growing while using borrowed funds for other purposes. Let's look at a real-world example. Say you want to renovate your kitchen, and you have two options. You could sell some of your investments to pay for it, or you could take out a home equity line of credit, HELOC, at a low interest rate. If you sell your investments, you might miss out on potential growth. But if you use the HELOC, your investments can keep growing while you make improvements to your home. Or consider this scenario. You're thinking of starting a side business, but you don't want to dip into your savings. Taking out a business loan instead of using your personal savings could be a smart move. Your savings can continue earning interest, and you can use the loan to get your business off the ground. The goal here is to make the spread between what you're paying to borrow and what you're earning on your investments. It's like creating a little money-making machine that works for you. But remember, this strategy isn't without risks. You need to be confident in your ability to earn more than you're paying in interest, and you need to have a solid plan for repaying the borrowed money. Strategic borrowing can be a powerful tool for leveraging your money for greater growth. It's not about taking on unnecessary debt. It's about making calculated decisions that can help your money work harder for you. Think of it as a way to accelerate your wealth-building journey. But here's an important point. This strategy isn't for everyone. It works best when you have a stable financial foundation, a good credit score, and a clear understanding of the risks involved. You also need to be comfortable with the idea of carrying debt, even if it's good debt that's working in your favor. Let's break down some numbers to make this more concrete. Say you have $50,000 in savings that you're thinking of using for a home renovation. If you keep that money invested and it earns an average of 8% per year, that's $4,000 in potential earnings. Now, if you can get a HELOC at 5% interest for that $50,000 renovation, you'd pay $2,500 in interest for the year. The difference, $15, is what you've gained by using strategic borrowing. Of course, real-life scenarios are often more complex. Market returns aren't guaranteed, and interest rates can fluctuate. That's why it's crucial to do your homework before jumping into strategic borrowing. Research potential investments thoroughly, understand the terms of any loans you're considering, and always have a backup plan. Remember, the wealthy often use debt as a tool to build more wealth. They're not afraid of debt, they respect it and use it wisely. They understand that smart borrowing can help them take advantage of opportunities they might otherwise miss out on. So how can you start thinking about strategic borrowing in your own life? Start by looking at your current debts and investments. Are there opportunities to refinance high-interest debt to a lower rate? Could you use a low-interest loan to invest in something that has the potential for higher returns like education or a side business? As you explore these options, always keep your overall financial goals in mind. Strategic borrowing should align with your long-term plans, not derail them. And never borrow more than you can comfortably repay. The risks of overextending yourself far outweigh any potential benefits. The debt hammer, building wealth or destroying finances? Let's talk about debt in a whole new way. You've probably heard that debt is dangerous, right? But what if I told you it's more like a tool, one that can either build your wealth or tear it down? The real question is, how do you make sure you're using it to construct, not destruct? Think about debt like a hammer. In the right hands, it can build amazing things. But in the wrong hands, well, it can cause some serious damage. The key is learning how to use this tool effectively. It's not about swinging wildly and hoping for the best. It's about precision, planning, and knowing exactly what you want to build. Here's the thing. Using debt without a plan is like swinging a hammer blindfolded. You might hit your target, but you're more likely to hurt yourself or break something important. That's why it's crucial to understand how debt works before you start using it. Just like you'd learn how to use a hammer safely before starting a home improvement project, you need to educate yourself about debt before incorporating it into your financial strategy. But with the right knowledge, debt can help construct your financial future. Imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't use a hammer for everything, right? Sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes a saw. The same goes for debt. It's not always the answer, but when used correctly, it can be incredibly powerful. Let's look at some examples of how debt can be used as a building tool. Maybe you're thinking about starting a small business. Taking out a loan to get your idea off the ground could be like laying the foundation for your financial future. Or perhaps you're considering going back to school to advance your career. A student loan, in this case, might be the framework that supports your long-term earning potential. But remember, it's about precision, not power. Small, strategic moves often work best when it comes to using debt. You don't need to take out massive loans to see results. Sometimes, a small personal loan to consolidate high-interest credit card debt can be the smart move that helps you get ahead. Think about your financial goals like a blueprint. What do you want to build? A comfortable retirement? A thriving business? A dream home? Once you have your blueprint, you can start thinking about how debt might help you achieve those goals faster or more efficiently. But just like you wouldn't use a hammer to paint a wall, debt isn't always the right tool for the job. Sometimes, saving and patience are the better choice. The key is learning when and how to use your debt hammer effectively. This means understanding interest rates, loan terms, and most importantly, your own financial situation. Let's say you're thinking about taking out a loan to invest in the stock market. Before you do, Ask yourself, do I understand the risks? Can I afford the payments if my investments don't perform well? What's my exit strategy if things don't go as planned? These are the kinds of questions that help you use debt as a building tool, not a wrecking ball. Understanding debt as a tool can transform approach to personal finance. Instead of seeing it as something to always avoid, you can start seeing it as a potential ally in your wealth-building journey. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Just because you can use debt doesn't always mean you should. Think about the successful people you know or have heard about. Many of them likely used debt strategically to get where they are. They didn't fear debt, they respected it. They understood its power and used it wisely to build their empires, whether those empires are businesses, real estate portfolios, or simply a comfortable life. But here's a crucial point. Using debt to build wealth isn't just for the rich and famous. Anyone can adopt this mindset, regardless of their current financial situation. It's about changing how you think about debt and money in general. Instead of seeing debt as a last resort, start seeing it as a potential first step towards your goals. Of course, this doesn't mean you should rush out and start borrowing money left and right. Remember, we're talking about using debt like a skilled carpenter uses a hammer, with care, precision, and a clear purpose. It's about making calculated decisions that align with your long-term financial goals. So, are you ready to start building your financial future? It begins with education. Learn about different types of debt, understand interest rates, and most importantly, get clear on your financial goals. Once you have that foundation, you can start considering how debt might fit into your wealth-building strategy. Let's wrap this up with a fresh perspective on debt. Think about it. Debt isn't some scary monster hiding under your bed. It's more like a powerful tool that can either build your wealth or tear it down, depending on how you use it. Here's the thing. Taking a close look at your debts isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about understanding how each loan or credit card is affecting your financial future. Why not take some time this week to review your debts? Are they working hard for you, or are they just weighing you down? Remember, getting smart about debt isn't just for financial gurus or big-time investors. It's a crucial step for anyone who wants to build real wealth over time. By making informed choices about when and how to use debt, you're setting